The air in Washington was thick with unease. Late-night headlines blazed across every screen. Judge Boasberg caught aiding Jack Smith in secret spy operation. The revelation hit like a political earthquake. Whispers of betrayal spread through Capitol Hill corridors, and for once, even Washington insiders couldn't hide their shock. It wasn't just another scandal, it was a moment that exposed how deep the rot had gone. While politicians scrambled to draft statements and strategists spun narratives, one voice cut through the noise, not from the Senate floor or a news desk, but from a stage in Los Angeles. Denzel Washington, who rarely spoke on politics, stepped into the national conversation with a calm fury that demanded attention. In a live interview on CNN's The Nation Speaks, Denzel leaned forward, his voice low but unwavering. "You see, corruption doesn't hide in the shadows anymore," he said. "It walks the halls of justice wearing a suit, shaking hands, and pretending to serve the people." The host froze for a moment. That line, delivered with Denzel's unmistakable gravitas, struck like thunder. Within minutes, clips of the segment flooded X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Hashtags like #CorruptionWearsASuit and #DenzelTruth started trending globally. This wasn't just a celebrity soundbite. It was a wake-up call, the kind that America hadn't heard in a long time. Within 24 hours, Denzel's words had become a national headline. "Corruption wears a suit" wasn't just a quote anymore, it was a movement. Protesters stood outside courthouses holding cardboard signs with those very words printed in bold. Even late-night hosts, usually hesitant to touch Washington's judiciary, couldn't ignore it. Behind the polished marble walls of the federal building, Judge Boasberg's chambers were buzzing. Aides whispered nervously, watching the public outrage grow online. Leaked memos hinted that Boasberg had exchanged encrypted messages with special counsel Jack Smith about internal strategies targeting Republican officials, a violation that went beyond ethics. The scandal wasn't about politics anymore, it was about power unchecked. Meanwhile, Denzel Washington wasn't done. Appearing on a special segment for NBC, he spoke with quiet intensity, no theatrics, no Hollywood veneer. "When justice bends for one man, it breaks for everyone," he said. "I'm not here to play judge or jury. But America needs to start looking at who's writing the rules, and who's breaking them in plain sight." His statement resonated far beyond Hollywood. It reached veterans, teachers, single parents, people tired of watching integrity traded for influence. Commentators called it the Denzel Doctrine, a cultural reckoning wrapped in truth. By midnight, reporters confirmed that a formal investigation into Boasberg's communications had begun. And as Denzel walked out of the studio that night, one journalist shouted, "Mr. Washington, are you afraid of retaliation?" He stopped, turned, and with that piercing calm said, "You only fear the truth when you're part of the lie." That clip went viral before dawn. By the next morning, Washington was in full crisis mode. Every network, from Fox to MSNBC, had a Denzel clip running on loop. The Justice Department tried to control the narrative, calling the leaks unverified and taken out of context. But the damage was already done. The public didn't care about the technicalities. What they saw was another powerful man in a suit, caught bending justice for political convenience. In the corridors of Capitol Hill, Boasberg's allies whispered that he had become a liability. Staffers deleted messages, lawyers scrambled to draft public statements, and rumors swirled that the judge might temporarily step down. But Denzel's voice lingered like an echo through every office. He had turned what could have been a footnote in political history into a moral trial for the entire system. At a town hall in Atlanta, Denzel appeared unexpectedly. He didn't come with a script, entourage, or security fanfare, just a microphone and conviction. The room fell silent as he said, "When the people lose faith in the courts, the whole nation starts to fall apart. And the ones who built that house of lies? They don't live under its roof, you do." His words electrified the audience. The applause wasn't just admiration. It was a collective exhale of frustration finally given a voice. Across the country, murals began appearing overnight, Denzel's face beside the phrase, "Corruption wears a suit." Artists, activists, and even veterans started using the slogan as a rallying cry for integrity. Meanwhile, Boasberg tried to defend himself in a press statement, claiming that the conversation with Jack Smith was procedural. But the American public wasn't buying it. On social media, one viral comment summed up the sentiment perfectly. "Procedural or not, justice doesn't text in secret." The walls of the White House trembled, not from noise, but from panic. Overnight polls showed something extraordinary. Denzel Washington, an actor, had become the most trusted voice in America when it came to justice and truth. In 1 week, his comments had done what years of political campaigning couldn't: he made people feel again. Cable news anchors struggled to frame the moment. Some tried to dismiss Denzel's remarks as Hollywood moralizing, while others quietly admitted he had said what millions were thinking. The country was tired of watching people in suits play chess with the truth while ordinary citizens paid the price. Judge Boasberg, cornered by scrutiny, called an emergency press briefing. Cameras flashed as he stepped up to the podium, visibly shaken. "I have nothing to hide," he said, forcing a smile. The communications in question were standard procedural coordination. But before he could finish, a reporter interrupted. "Then why were those messages deleted, Judge?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Boasberg froze, his silence doing more damage than any confession could. Within hours, major outlets aired leaked screenshots that contradicted his statement. The scandal was no longer a rumor, it was proof. Meanwhile, Denzel released a brief message on social media. No background music, no PR polish, just him, speaking directly to camera. "You can't preach justice while practicing deception. America deserves better." That clip became one of the most shared videos of the year, reaching over 100 million views within 72 hours. In comment sections, people wrote things like, "Finally, someone said it," and "He speaks like we used to believe presidents would." By the weekend, #Suitgate was everywhere. Politicians tried to pivot, journalists scrambled for exclusives, and Denzel Washington, without running for anything, had accidentally become the moral compass of the nation. By Monday morning, the story had crossed the ocean. European headlines read, "Hollywood star unmasks America's legal rot." In Asia, newspapers ran variations of the same idea: Denzel Washington speaks truth to power. What began as a domestic controversy over one judge's questionable conduct had turned into a global conversation about corruption, accountability, and the fragility of democracy. In London, BBC's evening broadcast showed clips of Denzel's calm yet piercing message, "You can't preach justice while practicing deception." The anchor's tone was almost reverent as she said, "It's not every day that a Hollywood actor shakes the conscience of a superpower." Meanwhile, in Berlin, protesters gathered outside the U.S. Embassy holding signs that read, "The world is watching." It was the same phrase Denzel had once used about another scandal, and now it had become a symbol of moral resistance. Inside the United States, the pressure mounted. Congress members were grilled by their constituents during town halls. "If an actor can see the rot," one voter shouted, "why can't you?" Even law professors who once defended the judicial system's checks and balances began to admit that Washington's speech had exposed an uncomfortable truth: the people no longer believed in their guardians. Denzel, meanwhile, avoided interviews. When a journalist caught up to him outside a charity event in Los Angeles, he offered only one quiet sentence: "This isn't about me. It's about the system we're all feeding, some with power, others with silence." That quote hit harder than any movie line. By the end of the day, The Guardian published an op-ed titled "Denzel Washington, the Reluctant Conscience of America." It argued that he had done something even the most seasoned politicians couldn't: he made integrity go viral. And as night fell over the Capitol, an anonymous message began circulating on encrypted channels within the Department of Justice. Boasberg will not survive this week. The storm had only begun. The next 48 hours felt like a slow-motion collapse of Washington's moral core. Every major outlet ran wall-to-wall coverage of what pundits had dubbed the Boasberg fallout. Cable news graphics flashed phrases like, crisis of credibility, and, justice in question. And at the center of it all, unintentionally, unwillingly, stood Denzel Washington. He hadn't sought the spotlight. But the people had made him something larger than an actor, a symbol of the conscience America had misplaced. His words, "You can't preach justice while practicing deception," were spray-painted on courthouse steps, printed on protest banners, and quoted in classrooms. Even conservative commentators, desperate to control the narrative, couldn't stop echoing his name. Inside the Department of Justice, chaos reigned. Leaked memos showed that Boasberg's private communications went beyond Jack Smith. They hinted at collusion with political donors and, worse, selective manipulation of high-profile cases. Lawmakers on both sides began to distance themselves, calling for an investigation. One senator declared on live television, "If Denzel Washington's words woke America up, maybe that's the one gift Hollywood ever gave this town." Meanwhile, outside the Capitol, crowds swelled. Ordinary Americans, teachers, nurses, veterans, held candles and signs demanding truth. Some shouted, "Denzel for justice," while others simply stood in silence, their presence saying everything. When a reporter finally caught up with Denzel as he exited a community center in south-central LA, his tone was measured but firm. "I'm not the story here. Justice is. And the day we forget that, we all lose." That quote went viral again, spreading faster than any press release or politician's statement. Overnight, a movement formed under a single banner, #JusticeOverPower. It wasn't just a trend, it was a reckoning. And deep inside his chambers, Judge Boasberg read those words as he drafted a resignation letter no one was supposed to see. By Thursday morning, the inevitable had happened. Judge Boasberg resigned. The statement, released just after dawn, was short, sterile, and painfully insincere. "For the good of the institution and to preserve public trust, I am stepping down." But America wasn't fooled. The public saw it for what it was, an escape, not accountability. Outside the courthouse, the air crackled with tension. Reporters swarmed, cameras rolled, and chants echoed from behind the police barricades, "Justice over power." The phrase, born from Denzel Washington's quiet defiance, had evolved into a rallying cry. People from every state began showing up with homemade banners and handwritten letters, many saying the same thing, "You reminded us what truth sounds like." Meanwhile, inside the White House, the mood was grim. Advisors shuffled through emergency meetings, discussing damage control. One aide whispered, "This isn't just about Boasberg. This is about trust. The people think Denzel's the only honest man left." In the Situation Room, the president's chief of staff slammed a folder on the table. "We can't let an actor define the justice narrative." But even he knew it was too late. Denzel's name had transcended Hollywood. College professors were dissecting his speeches in ethics courses, pastors were quoting him in Sunday sermons. He had become the voice that filled the silence politicians had left behind. Yet Denzel himself wanted no crown. In a rare statement through his publicist, he wrote, "This was never about fame or politics. It's about holding the mirror steady, even when you don't like what you see." That single line hit harder than any resignation. It became a headline around the world. Foreign leaders commented, comedians referenced it, and late-night hosts joked that Denzel had done more for American democracy in a week than Congress had in a decade. As night fell over Washington, D.C., a drone shot captured thousands of candles flickering outside the Supreme Court, a quiet sea of light beneath a dark sky. Somewhere in Los Angeles, Denzel sat alone in his backyard, watching the coverage. His phone buzzed non-stop, but he didn't answer. Because for him, this wasn't over. This was the beginning of accountability.by Friday. The story had gone global in ways even Denzel couldn't have imagined. British tabloids splashed headlines like, "The actor who brought down a judge," while in France, Le Monde published an op-ed titled, "The Hollywood Conscience." Across social media, the hashtag Justice Over Power had become a worldwide chant. People in Brazil, South Africa, and Japan were holding rallies, some even projecting Denzel's words onto government buildings. You can't preach justice while practicing deception. But not everyone celebrated. Inside the White House, panic turned into strategy. A quiet war room was set up under the communications office. The mission: discredit Denzel Washington. A senior advisor's words leaked to the press later that week: "If we can't silence him, we'll stain him." Within hours, an anonymous campaign began spreading online: false rumors, manipulated videos, fabricated financial records. Cable pundits who once quoted Denzel began questioning his motives. One anchor sneered, "Is this really about justice, or just another Hollywood ego trip?" Yet, instead of fading, the smear campaign detonated in their faces. Fact-checkers dismantled the lies within hours. Independent journalists traced the source of the misinformation back to a government-linked PR firm. The discovery set off another wave of outrage, louder, angrier, and more united. That night, Denzel appeared at a community event in Atlanta. The gymnasium was packed, the air buzzing with emotion. He didn't bring notes, didn't read from a teleprompter. His voice carried with the calm authority that only truth can give. They think if they throw enough dirt, they can bury what's right. But here's the truth: you can't bury something that's already rooted in the people. The crowd erupted. Someone shouted, "Tell Denzel." Another yelled, "We've got your back." The applause went on for minutes. The next morning, every major outlet carried the same headline: "Smear campaign fails, Denzel Washington's message only grows stronger." Even those who didn't like him had to admit it: Denzel had become something Washington hadn't seen in decades, a voice that couldn't be bought, bent, or silenced. By the weekend, America was no longer just talking, it was transforming. News anchors who once tiptoed around political truth were now speaking bluntly. Newspapers that had buried corruption stories on page 12 were suddenly running full exposés. What Denzel Washington had sparked wasn't a controversy anymore, it was a national awakening. The White House communications team had run out of counter-narratives. Leaked internal memos revealed desperation: control the story or lose the country. But the story had slipped beyond their control. From New York to Los Angeles, citizens marched under banners quoting Denzel's now legendary line, "Justice isn't a performance, it's a responsibility." Then, in a stunning twist, the National Civic Forum, a bipartisan organization rarely known for unity, invited Denzel Washington to deliver a televised address to the nation. It was to be broadcast live on every major network. The decision sent shockwaves through political circles. Some called it unprecedented, others dangerous. But the people? They couldn't wait. When the night arrived, millions tuned in. Denzel stood at a simple podium in a darkened auditorium. No fanfare, no Hollywood gloss, just him, a single spotlight, and silence so heavy it hummed through the screen. He began quietly. "I'm not here to entertain. I'm here because silence has become expensive, and we've all been paying the price." He spoke about corruption, accountability, empathy, not as a politician, but as a man tired of excuses. He invoked the struggles of forgotten families, the courage of truth-tellers, and the weight of moral decay. Every sentence hit like a hammer wrapped in velvet. We can't fix the system by pretending it's broken, we have to admit we broke it. And if those in power won't change, the people must remind them who gave that power in the first place. By the time he finished, the crowd was on its feet. Social media imploded, hashtags like #DenzelForTruth and #EnoughSilence dominated global trends. Even critics fell silent, unsure how to argue against authenticity that raw. For the first time in decades, the nation wasn't looking to politicians for direction. It was looking to a man who had no political title, but more integrity than most of them combined. The morning after Denzel's national address, America felt different. The usual noise, pundits shouting, politicians spinning, headlines twisting, was replaced by something unfamiliar: reflection. It was as if the country had paused, collectively realizing it had been running on fumes of division and deceit for too long. Polls showed a staggering shift. Trust in government institutions had plummeted, while public confidence in civic movements surged. Late-night hosts replayed Denzel's speech in full, calling it the most honest moment in American television in decades. Students wrote essays about it, teachers dissected its tone and purpose, and veterans wrote letters saying it reminded them why they'd once believed in the country they fought for. Meanwhile, in Washington, the aftermath was chaos. Lawmakers faced relentless pressure from their own constituents. Petitions for judicial reform flooded Congress. Protesters camped outside the Supreme Court, chanting, "Clean the bench." A phrase born from Denzel's fiery accusation that corruption wore a suit and smiled in court. Judge Boasberg's resignation had been only the beginning. Investigations opened into his associates, lobbyist networks, and several major corporations tied to government contracts. Each revelation fed the fire, proving Denzel's words had been more than rhetoric, they were prophecy. And Denzel? He vanished from the spotlight as suddenly as he had entered it. No interviews, no follow-ups. When a reporter finally reached him at a quiet cafe in Santa Monica, he just smiled and said, "My job was to remind them of their conscience. The rest is on them now." Those words became the story's perfect ending. He wasn't chasing fame or power, he was handing the torch back to the people. Weeks later, murals appeared in cities across America. In one of them, painted on the side of a courthouse in Philadelphia, Denzel's silhouette stood tall beneath his most famous line. "Corruption wears a suit, but truth wears no disguise." It wasn't just a quote anymore. It was a movement. A promise. And somewhere, under the quiet hum of a reborn nation, one man's voice, steady, defiant, unbought, still echoed. Justice over power. Always. This isn't just about one judge, one government, or one actor. It's about all of us, choosing truth when lies are easier, standing tall when silence feels safer. Power will always test integrity. But as long as people stand together, as long as we remember that justice belongs to the people, not the powerful, no corruption can last forever. Don't wait for heroes. Be one. Every voice matters. Every action counts. The truth isn't loud, but it never dies.